evening. Thank you for coming to Indivisible Rhode Island statewide meeting. And tonight we're going to start off with one of our advisory board members, Phil Gramm, who's going to give you an update on what's going on with Indivisible.
Hello? 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 Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. All right. I follow the attorney Seth Abramson a lot, and he's a guy who has probably the best analysis of what's going on in the Russian conspiracy.
Louder.
Now louder. Okay. How is that? Good?
Yeah.
No backup? Okay. I follow Seth Abramson, who has a wonderful Twitter account. I'm not on Twitter, but I'm on something called Twitter Lite, so I can read it all without having to do any comments and getting lost down that rabbit hole. And he wrote recently that he thinks that we're entering into a kind of an informational lull. That Mueller is really putting everything together, but we're not going to hear that much. And so we have to be brave, and we have to be patient, and we have to be strong. But he also believes that in 2019 he will be impeached. He says there's more stuff than anybody could possibly imagine, and it's going simply to be the end of him. So what do we do in the meantime? One of the things is we have to work for the election of as many blue candidates as possible in 2018, in November. And I think we also have to get more involved, too, in other kinds of things. It's just sitting on our hands is simply not enough. I will say that the reason why I'm excited about the fact that Abramson believes that Trump is going to be impeached in 2019 is because he's been gathering evidence on his Twitter account and making long investigative threads, and virtually everything that he has predicted from his research has come true. And the Senate Select Committee has been following his leads, and Mueller has been following his leads. He's a pretty amazing person. Another person, if you want to follow and make sense of this, is Marcy Wheeler's blog, Empty Wheel. It's a little wonky, and I have it on the pass out that I have there, but she has some very, very good pieces about, when Mueller does a new thing, such as what he did today, with why he's investigating Manafort, she reads the thing and she noted little things like the redacted document that we got to look at. The page numbers have been redacted so that nobody can know how long that document is and what else is on it. Or that at the end of a description of why they were investigating Manafort, before there's a big redacted blackout, it doesn't end in a period, it ends in a semicolon. So that there's much, much more that they're investigating Manafort for that they don't want him to know about, or Trump to know about, or anybody to know about. That's the level of real intense looking at the facts, looking at the details that Marcy Wheeler does. And Seth Abramson is much more like that. So one of the things I found recently to help us kind of get going is on the Daily Kos website, there's a link to tons of other links. And what I have here is a list of just a few, but there must be 40 or 50 of them. So if you feel like there's something you want to do, you got to do, go to those links, check it out. Postcards to Voters, I've talked about here before. People are still doing that. I'll be doing another one pretty soon. Knock on Every Door is an organization that gets you organized and get together with people who simply knock on every door and make sure that people are registered to vote and that they're going to vote. My Ride to Vote is how you can get involved in getting people to the voting booth. Get them to the polls. If they can't get there on their own, volunteer to drive people. Helping people to get voter IDs is a very important thing right now, especially when there are places where it's very, very hard in some states to get a voter ID or that attempt to suppress the vote. Brand new Congress is a way to really help out with all the blue candidates out there. Pro-science political action, if somebody is really into science. I wish some people were here about this. The Wellstone Institute also. Paul Wellstone, the great senator from Minnesota, his widow has a really terrific website in which they organize progressives into action. National Women's Political Caucus, and it goes on and on and on. And so my feeling is just waiting to vote in November, just waiting for Mueller to indict a few more people is not enough. We are little drops, you know? We are little drops, but we are going to be a gigantic wave, I believe, an absolutely gigantic wave. Now, the one good thing about Trump, I will have to say, is that he has motivated me in my political convictions. He's really gotten me off my ass, you know, and I think everybody else is feeling that, right? And in many different ways. Shauna is running for office. Rachel is getting deeply involved in women's reproductive rights legislation. I work at a soup kitchen, and I write for Street Sites newspaper. I just interviewed 2 people in the recovery community who are amazing people who had terrible childhoods, who have recovered and now work to help other people recover. It's incredibly inspiring, and I can't believe that I didn't notice certain things before. Like there's this one place called Operation Stand Down, and it's a veterans organization. They provide housing, new housing, for veterans who are homeless. And they're all over Rhode Island. You've probably driven by them and didn't even notice, but they're there. You know, there's an amazing number of good people doing really, really incredible things. And now here's the one where I think I was very pessimistic about that. And this is reaching out to Trump supporters. I know, it seems impossible. You know? It does. But why can't our blue wave carry a few red votes? We're going to need everybody. And I'm going to tell a story. About a month ago, 3 weeks ago, do you remember? Andy got an invitation for somebody from Indivisible to appear on a radio station and talk. And he said, why don't you do it, Phil? And I said, well, okay, you know. It wasn't that far away. It was in Seekonk? Swansea. Yeah, Swansea. So I'm driving there. Unbeknownst to me, Andy is home, and he turns on the radio station, getting ready, and he hears that it's a right-wing radio talk show. So he calls my wife, and she gets on and goes, oh my God, and she calls me, and he calls me, but I'm just driving along, and I've got my phone off, so I don't know what's coming. Get in the parking lot. You know those big 2 towers that are right there in Swansea? They look like they're nuclear power plants, but it's actually not, you know, right there. So I get in, and immediately the guy said, well, I'm pretty conservative. And then the guy next to him is finishing up his show, says, look, the Bolshevik arrived. So, what am I going to do? I didn't get any warning. You guys tried to warn me, but I didn't get any warning. So I thought, I'm going to love this guy to death. I'm not going to be a liberal stereotype. It was a good thing that as his music was coming in just before we started, it was music that I recognized. And I said, is that Grand Funk Railroad? Because my brother used to play it all the time. I hated Grand Funk Railroad, but I recognized the song. And he said, yeah. And so we had a conversation just as the show was starting about Grand Funk Railroad. And I recommended to him the new album by Procol Harum, one of my favorite bands from the 60s. And I refused to get angry. I refused to have him see me as the professor. He kept saying, it's Professor Philip Graham. Professor Philip, it was a call-in show, by the way. He was trying to incite people to call up and yell at the professor, and I refused to be a professor. I refused to be an ideologue. So when we were going on about all of Trump's misogyny, he said, well, what about Bill Clinton? And I said, yeah, he was a dog. He was surprised at what, you didn't like that? I said, of course not. Who would like that, you know? So you're mad about this from your side, and I'm mad about it from my side, and actually we agree, don't we? And he had to agree with me. And then he had all this information, tons and tons of information. He wanted to talk about climate change. And I looked at the first page and I thought, oh, this is all bullshit. If I say it's bullshit, though, it's not going to work, right? So I said, okay, I concede your point. There's no climate change. You know, it's not happening. So what are we doing? What's wrong with working to make sure that there's no more coal and no more gas or oil that is bad for everybody's health, and we do all solar, and we do all wind because it's getting cheaper and cheaper. In fact, in some cases, it's far cheaper than it is the traditional stuff. And so why wouldn't we do that? And he didn't have anything to say to me. And I said, and by the way, if we don't allow ourselves to invest in this more and more, China is going to take over, and they're going to sell the technology to us instead of our selling the technology to them. Why would we do that? They had nothing to say. We ended up being kind of friendly. In between, you know, when the music was going on, or the call-in announcements, or news, or whatever, I talked to him about his family, his job. I made sure he knew about my family and so forth. And I kept saying to him, you know, I always wanted to do this. I always wanted to talk to a conservative person. And I've never, ever had a chance. So this is a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun. Are you having a lot of fun? And he was like, yeah, you know. And he invited me back, though. He said he would invite me back. He hasn't done it yet. It was really a good experience. And the one question I wished he had asked, I wished he'd asked a lot of questions, but one of them was the whole thing about taking your guns away. Because I got a good answer to that too, which is how. How's that going to happen? Who's going to take your guns away? Police? Military? Who's going to take them away? Door-to-door fighting with 9 million people who own 80% of all the guns in the country? That's really going to happen? You think that's going to happen? That's not going to happen. Stop worrying about it. Just stop worrying about it. There are ways, I think, in which you can talk to Trump people. I think there are ways in which you can talk to conservatives by simply not allowing the discussion to go on their terms, but finding a middle ground that they can't really disagree with. There are enough of those there. And so for me, I'm angry. I don't like Trump supporters, but they're also human beings, and they also, I've discovered on this radio show, can be talked to. And it's important to remember that they're fellow citizens, misguided fellow citizens, but fellow citizens. And that guy heard stuff from me that he had never heard in probably ever, because he's in his bubble. So invite a conservative for coffee, you know, and talk to them. Don't argue with them, talk to them. There is agreement possible. There's a way in which they might see